Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to come here today to moderate this panel. I think we've got some interesting topics to discuss. I'd like to welcome to the stage Mr. Costas, Mr. Henk, and Owen, who will be joining me on this discussion. Mindful that everyone's probably really hungry, so we'll try to keep this as efficient as possible. But I'd just like to start with a quick deep dive into who each of us are. My name is Barry O'Reilly. I head up the project management division in the UAE. And alongside me, I will introduce some of the colleagues. So over to you, Costas.
Hi, I'm Costas Livderis. I'm the hospitality lead for Parsons for the region.
Hello, my name is Owen Devlin. I'm a project quantity surveyor at Compass Project Consulting.
My name is Henk Meijknecht, former CEO of Kempinski Hotels and now private equity as an investor.
Excellent. So how we're going to structure the conversation today is we're going to start at the pre-planning stage, run through design, construction, all the way to day one operations. So I think on that point, we'll structure it so that we follow the flow of the actual projects. And I'll start with you, Henk. From your experience, how do you ensure that there's alignment of this physical design with the actual market strategy and the day one operations for guest experiences?
Well, currently we are bidding for 2 hotels in Medina on leased land, 300 keys each, the building. There's no operator as yet. We're talking about upper upscale. So it's our team as private equity, together with a designer, an architect, interior designer, who puts a set together to bid for these plots for the municipality. And then we look at, what's the competitive set, what is the style of hotels, having in view the potential operator in future, what would they think? And we're also taking consideration, what is the guest expectation? What is the owner's expectation? What is the visibility or how much money you want to put in per key? In this particular case, we're looking at $300,000 US per key. What goes into the main construction, the hardware, the FF&E, the back of the house, the software. And then we sort of have a brainstorming discussion with potential guests, with potential operators, with the architect, what is feasible.
Interesting. So just following on from that, what would you say the relevance of market analytics takes, and how does that impact some of the operational requirements for day one opening?
Very important. I mean, the type of market you operate, of course, has a correlation with the type of design, the construction cost, the budget. I mean, are we talking here about new build or conversion? Is it a resort? Is it a corporate hotel? Mecca and Medina are very unique environments in that particular high turnover of rooms. Rooms have to be a little bit larger because sometimes you talk about extra beds, 2, 3, 4 people per key. So the market environment itself is very important. We're looking at the pipeline, which other hotels are coming up in the market, and how do they affect our position, our design, our construction budget. So all these components together. And of course, very important is, as an investor, what ultimately is my return of investment? How much money do I want to pour into a project and a key to get satisfaction return of investment, given the term sheet of the banks, loan to value, interest rates, all these components.
Excellent. And that leads me into moving a little bit away from the investment and operation side. Owen, from your sort of experience, what would you say is the correct or the efficient stage for engaging professional consultants such as commercial, project management, LDCs, and how early do you think that inception needs to happen?
Yeah, Barry, it's a topic I have I suppose a real foothold on, and I think it's completely only right for consultants and developers to really align from the get-go, and that's from concept, feasibility stage, and really honing in on the scope of works, the client's expectations at that stage, and I suppose really understanding what the budgets are, what the program is, and really, I suppose, meeting that client expectation and delivering what the developers are asking, and because as well, a lot of the issues don't usually come from concept or pre-construction, phase. It usually comes later down the line in construction phase. So I think with consultants making sure that they're all aligned at that stage, it makes it a lot more easier for the construction phase to progress a lot more efficiently.
No, I totally agree. I think early engagement and alignment across all stakeholders is the key to success. So I totally agree with you, Owen. So moving on, Costas, I'm going to ask you a bit of a challenging question. You know, with multiple stakeholders in the hospitality world, how do you manage the shifting priorities between, you know, what the operator, what the developer, what the brand standards are requiring, and also, let's not forget, especially in the Middle East region, the compliance with local regulation and authorities?
Very delicately. From my personal experience, I've actually been with the contractor, I've been with the operator, and I've been with the developer. So I understand where each of them coming from. Every stakeholder has a valid, however, sometimes competing agenda. Of course. Okay? So the best thing to do is start with have everybody work together on the project execution plan. They buy into the project execution plan. It's a dynamic guide and vision of how to deliver this project. You have to have clear and structured governance as far in a decision-making framework. You know, keep the aesthetics and the brand with the operator, cost and risk with the developer, constructability and compliance with the PMC. That's a good way. If everybody agrees on that and everybody's working together, you have workshops to discuss trade-offs between brand, cost, and local regulations. Okay? And if you work, there's ways to mediate it, to give and take on some of the stuff. I know for myself, when I was with Four Seasons, we would accept some trade-offs for other ones. Okay? That's basically an overall guide. Now, with local authorities, you have to treat it more as of a collaboration, not a constraint. Okay? You have to get them involved early, explain the design intent to them, show them your draft FLS strategy, your sustainability, get them involved early, have them understand design, so when it comes to the permitting and the sign-off, it's done quickly, rather than all of a sudden civil defense shows up and you have to add 20 more cameras when you're already finished, right? So that's the best advice going forward.
Excellent. So I think, look, at this pre-planning stage, the message coming from the panelists here is that early planning and coordination amongst the multiple stakeholders is the key to success. If you lose a project in the pre-planning stage, it's very hard to recover, and you're always chasing that timeline. So moving swiftly on into sort of more the design construction phase, I'll open up with a question to you, Costas. So obviously efficiencies is becoming a hot topic in not just hospitality but all construction projects. How do you see, you know, applying efficiencies in design from an operational side, how do you manage that to not negatively impact the guest experience from day one?
Yeah, exactly. The first and foremost, you have to bring the operator in as soon as possible, I believe. Okay?
Yeah.
And if you get them even to review the architectural layouts during the concept phase, so they can review the guest flows, the back of house, that's optimal, even before you get into the schematic design. Okay. In addition, it's strategic placement of the lifts of the back of house areas on the guest floors to minimize guest interference, as well as shorten your staff travel times.
Okay. I suppose just touching on them points, I'll open this one to both Hank and yourself, Costas. What, from experience on previous projects, what would you say is the one operational requirement that sometimes gets overlooked in the design stage that really needs to be focused on?
I think in most of the project we've done, we have a lot of emphasis on front of the house, the lobby, the sense of arrival, the mock-up room. What's forgotten is the back of the house. Back of the house, very important component, specifically in upper upscale and luxury hotels. You need a substantial back of the house to service your front of the house. Happy employees, good facilities for them, proper offices, proper kitchens. I see there's more and more need for storage. The kitchens need extensive storage these days and distribution facilities, HACCP requirements, a hygiene code. So these are areas which are overlooked. And for me personally, I did a project in China a few years ago, and then suddenly the architect comes up with space planning for distribution pumps or distribution panels, huge spaces, suddenly taking away from back of the house and from guest areas, and said, couldn't you tell me that earlier when you did the space planning? Yeah, we didn't know, and that was quite frustrating.
Excellent. So I suppose that sort of drives the next sort of clarification from my side is, with evolving guest experiences and tech requirements changing, how do you look at future-proofing your asset properly from the stage of design through maybe 3 years later? How are you future planning to make sure that that property is
Well, honestly, we're not very good at that. Okay, so for some reason, we're so stressed and we're so focused on completing the project. We have critical paths, we have limited budgets, and then somebody comes up and says, yeah, but what do we do in 10 years' time? Well, that's not very good for your career if you bring it up in a project meeting, but you're absolutely right. Adaptability is so important in terms of the technology, the IT, the guest requirements, hygiene requirements, space planning, new concepts, new restaurant models. I don't have the answer for that, but I know it's a huge challenge for us in the industry to sit down, currently plan a hotel which is going to open in 3 years' time, and then have a discussion in parallel is what are we going to do in terms of adaptability in 10 or 15 years' time. Very tough discussion.
Excellent. Okay, so Owen, obviously we're in the design stage at this point in time. From having a similar role to myself, where do you see your role starting, and probably more relevant from a commercial standpoint, does your role finish at handover defects liability period, or do you give inputs towards the operations team on CapEx, and how do you see that transition interface going?
Yeah, I suppose, look, we have an outlook that our jobs go far past the DLP period. So I suppose what that means is actually sitting down with the MEP consultants, the kitchen consultants, and really making sure that efficiencies are there. Because as Hank just said, we're not just looking towards the handover date. We're looking far beyond that. We're looking 10 years' time. So that space is operating efficiently. So it really opts into that sense of the capital expenses and the operating expenses post handover and DLP period. So we really align with our consultants and get the client on board to say, and we usually take the lead. We have a brilliant project delivery team that really take the lead and look beyond our tenure on the project. So I think to make the space really efficient, it does take that, and to take that initiative, I suppose, to really drive that.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there. And I suppose that kind of leads me nicely into during the actual construction phase. What measures or processes, which is fundamentally going to be an important piece, to ensure cost control is in place and that the project is kept within budget, which obviously is a challenge similar to what we were speaking about with Costas earlier with the multiple stakeholders. How do you approach that, Owen?
Yeah, probably relating back to one of my first points is I have a real emphasis on front-loading the, I suppose, due diligence that we do internally, in the sense that right from concept, right from feasibility stage, we really push the boundaries in the sense that, okay, what are the standards that are expected from this project? What are the specifications? What is the scope of works? What is the, I suppose, program delivery that the client's looking? And as I said, a lot of the issues come after the pre-concept phase, because when it's happening on site, it's nearly too late.
Yep.
So, protecting the budget at the early stages, I think, is absolutely key to a successful delivery, and really meeting the standards, meeting the client expectations. Brilliant.
Not to pick on you, Owen, but I just have a follow-on question about just during that handover stage and that transition to operational. We're talking about success of day one. So how do you see that interface working? I think it's very similar to our conversation earlier about DLP. It's how do you approach that and make sure it's streamlined? Yeah,
I suppose it's really about making the space, I suppose, not only appealing looking, but actually designing the space that it's efficient in terms of the maintenance access, the MEP layout, things like this that affect the, I suppose, the energy efficiency of the space. So again, it's really not just leaving it up to the client to liaise with the other teams involved, because at the end of the day, we're all working towards the end goal of delivering this project successfully. Because I can feel sometimes teams can be too far apart, and the design team sends us over the information, and it's sort of left with the cost consultants. So I think it's really, as I said, getting the operations team in as early as possible, and really making sure that the space is working efficiently.
Yeah, perfect. And later in our conversation, Hank, I'm going to touch on some of that around the pre-opening stage. But considering we're talking about, the commercial and timeline section of the program, Costas, I'd like to have you experience challenges where the delivery or development team's schedule maybe has a conflict with the operational team's schedule, and how do you go about ensuring that there's an alignment between the stakeholders in that manner?
That's a great question, and yes, I've experienced it on every project. All right, so it's the most common. It's the most common conflict on a hospitality project. The developer wants to finish, the operator wants to get in, but you want to make sure everything's properly constructed and finished and snagged and handed over. There's two trains of thought there. Either one is 100% completion, then hand it all to the operator, or a phased handover. I'm a fan of the phased handover, where we actually did an excellent job here on the Four Seasons Jumeirah Beach, where the H&H, Four Seasons, and DC aligned. Yep. They handed over the kitchens 12 weeks ahead of opening. They handed over the ballroom 8 weeks so we could get all the OS&E, the 1,000 items there, and it could be distributed to the ballroom. So it's all about making sure that if it's going to be a phased handover, you have that embedded into the contractor's contract.
Excellent.
Okay. So they have those milestones.
I see Hank nodding there.
I have a slightly different opinion about that. I mean, if you open a resort, luxury resort or a luxury asset, it has to be ready. It has to cater to guests. People are paying $800-900 a night. Yes. And if you then enter a phased opening, a so-called soft opening, it's going to have a negative feedback to the brand.
Yeah, I didn't mean a phased opening, just a phased handover to the operator. So it's going to be one opening, but you hand over sections of the property so the operator can get in, start his training.
Sure, there's a critical path, I agree. Yeah. What comes first? Storage facilities, ballroom to store your operating equipment,
yes,
etc., etc.
That's it.
But again, when we talk about trophy assets, luxury asset, upper upscale, I'm not advocating a soft opening. A hard opening, give customers at least 75% of inventory of the facilities. You can finish the 25%, but there are hotel projects right now, and I see them. They're opening 25% of inventory, huge guest complaints, fire alarms at night, facilities which are not functioning, swimming pool is not opening. I think it's not a good proposition for investors, yes, to enter this kind of
correct, opening. And I agree with you on that. It's definitely not the soft opening. It's just more of the phased opening so the operator can start the training and everything. And in fact, we followed this model, and we actually opened up a month before schedule on the Four Seasons Jumeirah Beach, which we opened up a month before Christmas, prime time, so everybody was very happy.
Interesting, because we're going to move on into that sort of pre-opening launch day. Hank, what I was intending to was sort of jump into something around how do you efficiently, facilitate a soft opening that, gives the staff the training requirements and education of the building without affecting the guest customer experience. But I suppose just to add to that, and probably more relevant following this conversation, is back to Owen's point earlier, there is a defects liability period. Contractors don't build everything perfect first time. There will be a punch list. From your side, is a challenge, but how do you manage that without the guests really getting impacted?
I think that very important is almost on a daily basis have project meetings. What's the progress? What's the facility? So as operator, you have a very good understanding and indication of what facilities are ready. Because it would be a big mistake to recruit 300 people, have 300 people on site, and the site is dangerous. Okay, you get the risks. There are going to be accidents. You don't want that. So you need to house them off-site. So the critical path is relevant. You need to give the contractor some leeway because none of the critical paths are handed over on time. So as an operator and an investor, we know we take 2 months, 6 weeks leeway, depending on the location. But if I look right now in Saudi Arabia, there is almost no project in Saudi Arabia which is handed over on time. Tremendous delays, huge expenses for investors to payroll, to house these people, the employees, to get them training facilities. So my advice is have daily project meetings, make sure that there is a transparent understanding between all the stakeholders, subcontractors, contractors, on payment, on paying the subcontractors, on delivery of goods and products, and delivering that pre-opening plan.
Effectively, you shift from being the operator who's inputting to controlling at that stage.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting. And Kostas, I want to reach out to you with a question, but Hank, maybe you have an opinion on it too. For soft openings or operational success, integration of all of your tech needs to be sort of pre-planned, from POS to security systems to PMS systems. What's the correct stage to fully complete the test and commissioning and have that functional systems in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. Integrated systems seem to be overlooked at the beginning sometimes, okay? And I think you really have to bring on an integrated system specialist early on to do the strategy and do the overall design of the integrated systems, okay? Then, I have a great presentation from one of the integrated system specialists out of the US that they sent me. It's a bubble diagram showing all the systems. So it starts with a GRMS and then POP, POS, PMS, concierge, Wi-Fi. But in the end, there's 23 systems that feed into the guest room alone. Okay?
Wow.
So if you imagine, and nowadays, when the guest gets out of the airplane, he checks in, it's a keyless system, so he goes right through to the room. So that system has to be in check-in mode. It has to, the HVAC has to go into check-in mode, the lights have to go on. There's no contact with the staff. So if your systems aren't operating properly, that guest experience is going to be severely affected.
That's what impacts.
So for testing commissioning, guidelines 6 months before the backbone, the infrastructure should be completed. Okay, 3 months the systems should all be completed. 6 to 8 weeks you start the system integration testing. Okay, then 4 weeks you get the user acceptance testing going on. And that's very important.
Excellent. I can tell you.
No, I agree with that. Yes. The sooner the better. Yes.
Look, mindful of time, Owen, just a final question for me before we open up for a Q&A. Obviously, at this operational day one stage, in the role that you would undertake, from your experience, what would you say is the biggest lesson learned at that stage that you wish you had have known at the pre-planning stage of a hospitality project?
Yeah, I think I keep going back to it. I think being involved through the full project life cycle, I think, is a real key component of a successful delivery, because we have operators and developers that take consultants, cost consultants in for the pre-construction phase, and then it's a different sort of consultant that comes in at post-contract. So I just really think that within our company, we have pre-contract specialists and post-contract specialists. I think that is a real key driver of how a project's delivered successfully, and it really comes down to what we do before the project kicks off. So it is. I go back to it again. It's doing that bulk of the operations from the pre-construction phase.
Okay, perfect. Just would like to take this opportunity if anyone in the audience wants to raise a question for any of our panelists today. Excellent. I know everyone's hungry, but I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Hank, Owen, and Costas for a great conversation today, and hope everyone enjoyed it. Have a great day.